many other...
This is right, Arab.
Hello and welcome to WION Live broadcast from Washington. I'm Simon Marks, and in this news bulletin I'll be bringing you updates on stories from across the world. A fierce political battle for the lower chamber of Congress is underway in Mexico. Initial results indicate that Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador's coalition is set to retain its majority, but a reduced one. In a setback for Obrador, his party could see a major fall in its number of seats in the country's lower house. The coalition is likely to fall short of the two-thirds majority it wants, which would make it difficult for them to approve constitutional reforms. We'll get you more on that story shortly, but first, let's take a look at what else is making headlines at this hour.
भारत सरकार ही मुफ्त वैक्सीन उपलब्ध करवाएगी।
India's Prime Minister announces a new vaccination policy and says the centre will bear the cost of 75% of the vaccines procured. Those aged between 18 and 44 will also get free vaccine. He asks people to counter vaccine scepticism. The Mexican president is likely to retain a majority in the lower house of Congress, despite a setback in the country's midterm polls. Trends indicate that the president's Morena party will cross the halfway mark with help of allies. Israel begins vaccinating children between the age of 12 and 16 with Pfizer's COVID-19 jab. Israel is the second country after the US to start inoculating kids. In an unprecedented settlement with France's antitrust watchdog, Google has agreed to make changes to some of its online advertising services. The French authority fined Google €220 million for assuming market power. At least 52 people killed, several injured, and many others still trapped after two trains collided in Pakistan early this morning. The accident occurred near Gotki, a city in northern Sindh in Pakistan. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos announces that he will fly to space next month on board the flight launched by his Blue Origin firm. Bezos says he's wanted to travel to space ever since he was 5 years old. US Vice President Kamala Harris arrived in Guatemala on Sunday for her first overseas trip since taking office. Harris was greeted by the country's Foreign Minister Pedro Barolo as she landed in Guatemala City on Sunday. In her maiden trip abroad as Vice President, she's visiting Guatemala and Mexico, where she will meet foreign leaders and entrepreneurs in a bid to strengthen partnerships between the countries. The cross-border migration and growing migrant crisis in the US will be the key focus of her first foreign tour. The two-day visit will test Harris's diplomatic and negotiating skills as she looks to resolve the boiling issue in the region. Harris has been tasked by President Biden with addressing the root causes of the spike in migration to the US-Mexico border. Corruption, which is considered one of the key factors triggering the migrant crisis, is expected to be a central focus of her meetings with Guatemalan President Alejandro Gianmetti and Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Meanwhile, the Biden administration is also expected to announce measures to tackle smuggling and growing human trafficking later today. The counting of votes in Mexico's election to the country's lower house of Congress is underway. Initial results early on Monday indicate that President Andrés Manuel López Obrador's coalition could retain its majority in Mexico's lower chamber of Congress. Only 47% of ballots were counted by the end of Sunday. Electoral authorities released quick count results based on voting samples that allow estimates of voting trends to determine the potential makeup of the Chamber of Deputies. The election has been a setback for Obrador's Morena party, as it is likely to witness a decline from its current 253 seats to between 190 and 203. In the current Congress, the Morena party has a simple majority, but Obrador will now have to rely on votes from its allies in the Workers' Party and the Green Party. Together, they are expected to capture between 265 and 292 seats in the 500-seat legislature. The projected numbers would deprive the president of a qualified two-thirds majority that would allow his party to approve constitutional reforms. The opposition alliance, made up of the Institutional Revolutionary Party, the National Action Party and the Party of the Democratic Revolution, is estimated to win between 181 and 213 seats. The opposition claims the president has struggled to deliver on pledges to combat gang violence. The midterm elections were seen by many as a referendum on President Obrador's administration and his ability to continue what he calls the fourth transformation of Mexico. Obrador's term, however, has been overshadowed by the COVID-19 pandemic and cartel-related violence. The election itself was marred by violence, with dozens of politicians being murdered in the months leading up to the polls. On Sunday, a severed head was lobbed into a polling station and 5 election workers were shot dead. In Mexico State, an inactive grenade was lobbed into a voting station. Sunday's elections were the largest in Mexico's history. The midterm polls witnessed over 51% voter turnout. The president of the National Electoral Institute, Lorenzo Cordova, declared the election a success. The United States is mulling military action to counter cyber attacks. In fact, cyber crimes are going to be one of the key areas of focus when US President Joe Biden and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin meet in Geneva on June the 16th. US officials have been increasing pressure on companies as well as foreign nations to step up the fight against hackers. The US had earlier accused to hackers, and remember, Washington also accused Moscow of meddling in the 2016 and 2020 US presidential elections. Recently, several US establishments were targeted. A major fuel pipeline was attacked by hackers in May, and the world's largest meat supplier was targeted by cyber criminals just last weekend. The United States Energy Secretary said recently that adversaries have the ability to shut down the country's entire power grid. The attacks prompted the Biden administration to urge private firms to be more transparent about cyber crimes and to report these incidents to the authorities. This, as it was found that some firms had made ransomware payments. The authorities say that hacking attacks on crucial sectors like energy can endanger national security. Some lawmakers have even called for such payments to be made illegal. After a successful vaccination drive for adults, Israel has now rolled out the inoculation drive for teenagers aged 12 to 15. Here's a report.
When it comes to vaccination drive against COVID-19, Israel has been fairly successful. The vaccination campaign began with an aggressive effort by the government and was followed by a coordinated distribution of vaccines across the country. Israel has been setting an example for other countries around the world. Israelis will no longer be obligated to wear masks outdoors from June 15th. And now, the country has launched a campaign to vaccinate teenagers between the age of 12 and 15 years.
Today we're starting to vaccinate the group between the age of 12 to 15. Israel has been vaccinating for a few months already the group between 16 and up, so today we're starting with the 12-year-olds, which is another step and we're very excited. Children have to come with their parents or with a conform signed by their parents, and we're here to give them the vaccine and answer any questions they have.
Israeli media reported that thousands of appointments had already been made for teenagers to be vaccinated. At the Rosh Hashanah local medical center, parents of teenage children who came out to get their first dose voiced confidence in the move.
As a mother, you always want the best for your children. And here too, I did not have concern because I was certain that this would be the best solution for my child, for my daughter. We are in a different place today here in Israel with the vaccines, and I know we are helping the entire community by getting the vaccination, also for the youth.
I just want to get vaccinated as soon as possible because I believe in the vaccine and I trust it and I want my life back pretty much.
The move to vaccinate teenagers comes despite a health ministry announcement saying that it had found a small number of heart inflammation cases in young men who received the Pfizer jabs. An Israeli study found a probable link between receiving second dose of Pfizer vaccine and appearance of myocarditis or heart inflammation among men aged 16 to 30. The findings of the study are being examined further. In a statement, Pfizer has said that no causal link to its vaccine had been established. COVID-19 infections in Israel are down to just a handful a day. Total active cases in the country stand at 340. Israel's economy has reopened fully, but restrictions on incoming tourism still remain. About 55% of Israeli population has been fully vaccinated. As of June 1st, restrictions on social distancing, need for green vaccination passes to enter public places were all scrapped. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Now, in order to boost its COVID-19 arsenal, China has authorised the emergency use of its COVID-19 vaccine CoronaVac for children between the ages of 3 and 17 years of age. In an official statement to state media, the company's chairman, Yin Weidong, announced the decision on Friday. The government is yet to announce an exact date for the commencement of the drive. China's mass vaccination program, which has already administered over 763 million doses, is currently only open to those aged 18 and above. The vaccine, developed by Chinese firm Sinovac, has been found to be safe and equally effective among the younger age group as it is for adults. Sinovac has finished the Phase 1 and Phase 2 clinical trials involving several hundred volunteers in this age group. The preliminary results of the trial show that the vaccine can trigger an immune response in children similar to that in adults. After Sinovac, state-backed drug maker Sinopharm has also submitted a request to government agencies for emergency approval for kids. Besides inoculating its own people, China has also offered vaccines to other countries as part of its vaccine diplomacy. China has also offered 10 million vaccine doses to the WHO-backed COVAX initiative, which aims to provide vaccines to lower-income countries all over the world. Food insecurity in Ethiopia's conflict-hit Tigray region remains dire, with increasing reports of people dying of hunger. Millions of people are in desperate need of food and aid as the humanitarian crisis worsens in the conflicted region. The Voice of America brings you our next report. Take a look.
This school campus is now one of more than 24 camps for displaced families in Mekelle, the capital of Ethiopia's Tigray region. More than 80 people sleep inside each of these classrooms, the families say, and every one has a harrowing story about how they got here.
I
was at the market on a Saturday when suddenly tanks pulled in and the war began. I ran to my house and my sister was making coffee. I told her we had to run. We saw houses burning and heard bombs.
The World Food Programme says 5.2 million people in Tigray, more than 90% of the region's population, need emergency food aid. But here in Mekelle, where aid is available, people go hungry. By mid-afternoon in this camp, many families say they haven't eaten anything yet, and that this is not unusual. Local leaders of the displaced families say residents here are short of almost everything.
We are facing a lot of difficulties. We don't have enough food, shelter, sleeping materials, and clothing. Before the war, we fed our children 3 times a day, but now we cannot.
The conflict in the Tigray region began in November last year, when Ethiopian government troops were sent to the region to crush the forces of the Tigray People's Liberation Front. Now, roughly 2 million people have been forced from their homes. Thousands have been killed. Many more, like Zufan's 11-month-old son, have been injured. Zufan says her son's arm was injured as she fled, and it took her months to reach Mekelle for treatment.
I went to the doctor yesterday. He said, "Where were you? He needed an operation, but now you are too late."
There are children at the camp without their parents, and parents who lost their children in the chaos, Zufan says. And while her son may never have full use of his arm again, there are so many other mothers whose children are dead. Heather Murdoch, VOA News in Mekelle.
The troubled capital of Haiti is facing a crisis. Health infrastructure, which was always brittle in Port-au-Prince, is now seriously strained as doctors have been targeted by armed gangs over recent weeks. Our next report gets you all the details.
Doctors Without Borders is a French non-governmental organisation which runs the only hospital where treatment is free in the Haitian capital of Port-au-Prince. First established in 2006, the hospital offers everything from outpatient service to emergency trauma care. Even during the COVID-19 lockdown, the hospital witnessed high cases of patients who had sustained injuries due to gang violence.
We see violent or non-violent trauma cases. Cases from accidents on the street or from falls. But there also are violent trauma cases such as gunshot wounds and knife wounds. Violent accidents we see include gunshot wounds and stab wounds.
Despite operating in the troubled neighborhoods, Doctors Without Borders had seldom come under attack. Gangs which frequently targeted each other relied on the charity hospital. But a few incidents in the recent weeks have brought the issue of safety of doctors to the forefront.
Due to its work for so many years in those deprived neighborhoods, Doctors Without Borders has earned recognition that may not guarantee our safety, but that allows us to be in contact with the population, the community, and they recognize the work that we do. So we are protected as an institution, but as individuals, our colleagues face the same risks as any other Haitian when it comes to their work.
An employee of Doctors Without Borders was recently shot dead while he was on his way home. The motive for the attack is not clear. But the NGO does not believe that the doctor was targeted for his association with the group. For 3 decades, Doctors Without Borders has served the Haitians through earthquakes and cholera outbreaks. But more attacks on the group will make it harder for the NGO to serve in the troubled city. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Marking the 77th anniversary of the largest seaborne invasion in history, France has unveiled a memorial to honour the Allied soldiers who lost their lives in Normandy. Allied forces landed on the beaches of France's Normandy region, which helped bring World War II to an end. Voice of America has our report.
They called our beach Omaha. Don't ask me why. I've never been to Omaha, the one in Nebraska, I mean. it's anything like Omaha, France, you can have it.
June 6, 1944, D-Day. More than 150,000 American, British, and Canadian forces stormed the beaches of France's Normandy region, launching months of bloody battle. Experts say the assault changed the balance of power in World War II. Sunday, some 77 years later, some veterans marked the occasion publicly, even as ongoing coronavirus pandemic travel restrictions kept others, along with the families of fallen soldiers, from attending. In the English village of Alres, a group of Normandy veterans and relatives gathered at the unveiling of a D-Day monument called Vers-sur-Mer. D-Day veteran Sergeant Bernard Morgan remembers the invasion.
The thing I remember most is the sad sight of seeing so many dead bodies on the beach. They were mostly soldiers who landed early in the morning. Their landing craft had stopped short and they jumped into the water. Unfortunately, a lot of them were drowned because the kit they were carrying was so heavy and the poor lads had no chance. And it was the first dead body I'd seen, and it was very upsetting.
Morgan says he lost 3 men in Normandy, and wearing his medals, especially on the anniversary, reminds him of his fallen soldiers. Coronavirus restrictions limited the size of the crowd in Alres, but more than 100 veterans remotely watched the event, paying tribute to the more than 4,400 Allied troops who lost their lives on D-Day. Harash Arabasadi, VOA News.
Vertical farming in the past has proven to be fruitful, but amid the pandemic, with import restrictions, this practice has taken on a whole new meaning. Researchers in Russia are engineering ways to improve the quality of crops and production in a bid to decrease dependency on seed imports. Take a look.
These are vertical farms, a practice of growing crops in vertically stacked layers, often in a controlled environment, a practice that employs effective soil-less farming techniques. Amid the pandemic, these have gained renowned importance. Import of potato seeds in Russia was hindered due to the pandemic, as the world around us changed drastically. Scientists and researchers felt a growing need for newer agricultural practices. In a bid to be more self-sufficient, now these vertical farms are used to grow potato seeds. At this facility run by biotechnologists at the Russian Academy of Sciences Center for Future Agrotechnologies. And these LED light and temperature-controlled farms have yielded fruitful results, quite literally.
Here we are working on the technology to improve the quality of potato seeds. In the future, this seed will be used in the fields. In 5 years' time, we will be producing potatoes that all of us have at the table. Our technology overall is based on controlling LED lighting, which we choose specially for each variety.
In these stacked miniature farms, plants grow at an unusual speed. The brightness, color, and the length of duration of exposure to light all play a role in growth and quality of the plants. Pathogen-free air and nutrients are provided to the plant from a special growing medium. Scientists are creating a seed bank here. The seeds can then be sent to multiply in the fields.
All these seeds are imported, and during the last year with COVID restrictions, they were stuck at the border and we received them in very bad condition. At that time, we received the request to deal with this problem and start substituting imports.
Such technological progress gives the possibility of having 3 harvests in a year, because at least 100 days are needed for a single crop. If we use field conditions, we need 1 year. In the greenhouse, it is possible to have 2 harvests. In a closed facility with a microclimate, it is possible to have 3 rounds.
The idea here is to not let import restrictions hinder crop production. Vertical farms can significantly increase yields, but this will also significantly increase the cost of production. So here's the dilemma. Once the borders reopen and cheaper imports pour in, Will the need for self-sufficiency be outweighed by the high cost of production? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
The coronavirus pandemic is adding a new unwelcome element to sea pollution and adding to the plastic burden in the world's oceans. In the Philippines' Batangas province, divers are trying to clear face masks, face shields and protective personal equipment along with other plastics from the sea. I'll leave you today with these visuals. For more news and updates, stay tuned to WION World is One.